In the summer of 1586, a woman sat in a guarded manor house in the English Midlands and wrote a letter she believed no enemy could ever read. It was written in cipher, a private alphabet of symbols and signs, and smuggled out of the house, hidden in the stopper of a beer barrel. She had every reason to think it was safe. It was not safe. Before that letter ever reached the man it was written for, it had already been opened, copied, and decoded by the most dangerous spymaster in Europe. A man who had been reading her mail for months. A man who was waiting, patiently, for her to write down the one sentence that would let him kill her. She was a queen, a crowned, anointed queen, and what happened to her next was not a murder in the dark. It was a trial with commissioners, with evidence, with the full machinery of English law. That is the pattern of this channel. The state rarely needs a knife, it needs a signature. To understand how a single letter could kill her, you first have to understand why she had been a prisoner for 19 years, without ever being charged with a crime. Mary Stuart was born in December 1542 and became Queen of Scots when she was 6 days old. But it was not the Scottish crown that doomed her, it was her English blood. Mary was the granddaughter of Margaret Tudor, the elder sister of Henry VIII, and to Catholic Europe that made her something far more dangerous than a foreign queen. It made her the rightful Queen of England, not Elizabeth. So to every Catholic who believed Elizabeth was illegitimate, Mary was not a rival claimant. She was the true monarch, simply waiting for her throne. In 1568, after a catastrophic reign in Scotland, Mary was forced to abdicate and fled south, across the border, throwing herself on the mercy of her cousin Elizabeth. It was the worst decision of her life. Elizabeth did not embrace her and did not free her. She held her, moved from castle to castle for 19 years as an honored, watched, immovable prisoner. Because Elizabeth had a problem with no clean solution. While Mary lived, she was a magnet for conspiracy. There had already been two, the Ridolfi plot in 1571, the Throckmorton plot in 1583, each aiming to put Mary's body on Elizabeth's throne. And each time, when her ministers begged her to execute her cousin, Elizabeth refused. To kill an anointed queen was to admit that a queen could be killed, and Elizabeth, of all people, understood what that precedent might one day mean for her. So her ministers built a different kind of weapon. In 1584, they drew up the Bond of Association, and in 1585, Parliament passed the Act for the Queen's Safety, a law that made it lawful to try and to put to death anyone who plotted against Elizabeth and stood to gain from her death. One leading historian calls that bond, plainly, a license to kill. The trap was now built. It only needed Mary to walk into it. The man who would spring it was Sir Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth's principal secretary, and the closest thing the 16th century had to a spymaster. He had long believed there was only one way to make England safe. Mary had to die. His difficulty was getting the proof. In 1586, the opportunity arrived. A young, wealthy Catholic gentleman named Anthony Babington was drawn into a conspiracy. Assassinate Elizabeth, raise a Catholic rising, bring in a foreign invasion, and free Mary to take the throne. What Babington did not know was that the secret channel he used to reach Mary belonged to Walsingham. Here is how it worked. Mary was held at Chartley under a strict Protestant jailer named Sir Amyas Paulet, cut off from the world. But a way through was offered to her, letters, written in cipher, smuggled in and out, hidden in the stopper of a beer barrel delivered to the house. Mary believed she had found a crack in her prison wall. In truth, the crack had been engineered. The man who arranged it, Gilbert Gifford, was a Catholic double agent working for Walsingham. Every letter Mary sent or received took a quiet detour first into the hands of Walsingham's cryptographer, Thomas Phillips, who broke her cipher, copied the contents, and resealed the letter before sending it on its way. Mary was writing her most dangerous secrets down the one channel her enemy controlled completely. And this is the first question the case forces on us, so let's mark it plainly. Was this the detection of a real and deadly plot, or its deliberate cultivation? Because Walsingham did not simply intercept Mary's mail. He had built the postbox. On the 6th of July, 1586, Babington wrote to Mary. He laid out the whole design, the rising, the invasion, and in his own careful phrase, the dispatch of the usurping competitor, the killing of Elizabeth, and he asked Mary for one thing, her approval. For 11 days, the letter sat with her. Her own secretaries urged caution. On the 17th of July, against that advice, Mary answered. Her reply went through the plan point by point, and in it was the sentence the spymaster had waited years to read, that when all was ready, the 6 gentlemen should be set to work, and that she should be rescued at the same moment. In plain terms, it read as Mary giving her blessing to the murder of the Queen of England. It was, for Walsingham, a death warrant in her own cipher, but he wanted more than Mary. He wanted the entire network, so he had Phillips do something that should stop you cold. Phillips forged a postscript. Onto the bottom of Mary's letter, in a flawless copy of her own cipher, he added a passage Mary never wrote, asking Babington to name the 6 gentlemen who would do the deed. Sit with that for a moment. The state had, by its own account, a genuine confession of treason in hand, and it forged evidence anyway to fish for more names. We even have Walsingham's own letter days later, fretting that the fake postscript might have spooked Babington into running. And here is the knot at the center of this whole case, the part honesty demands we mark out clearly. The body of Mary's reply, the part that damns her, was almost certainly real. Her secretaries later confessed they had written it at her command, but the only version anyone ever produced in court was Phillips's decoded copy. The original vanished, and the same hand that decoded it had just proven it was willing to forge. The trap shut fast. Babington was hunted down, hiding in the woods at St. John's Wood, and arrested. That September, he and 6 fellow conspirators were put to death. The manner of it was brutal, even by the standards of the age. We won't dwell on it here. The cruelty isn't the story. The story was always Mary. Mary had been arrested in August, taken out riding, and never allowed to return. In October 1586, she was brought to Fotheringhay Castle and put on trial under the Act for the Queen's Safety, the law written, in effect, for this exact moment. The deck was stacked and she knew it. She faced 36 commissioners, among them Walsingham himself and Elizabeth's chief minister, Lord Burghley. She was given no defense counsel. She was not allowed to see her own seized papers nor to call witnesses. And she made the only argument left to her, that she was a foreign anointed queen, never an English subject, and so could not commit treason against a crown that was not hers. Look to your consciences, she told her judges, and remember that the theatre of the whole world is wider than the kingdom of England. It did not matter. The verdict was decided before she entered the room. In December, she was proclaimed guilty. And then the case stalled, because the one person who would not move was the Queen of England. Elizabeth signed nothing for weeks. She understood exactly what killing Mary meant. She would become the queen who proved that a queen could be lawfully put to death. She is even reported to have asked Mary's jailer whether he might quietly arrange an accident instead, and to have been refused. At last, on the 1st of February 1587, she signed the death warrant and handed it to her secretary, William Davison. What happened next has never been fully untangled. Davison passed the warrant to the Privy Council. Burghley, not waiting for any further word from the Queen, sent it north at once, before she could change her mind. One leading biographer argues this was no accident at all, that Elizabeth had arranged matters so she could disown the outcome whichever way it fell. The warrant reached Fotheringhay on the 7th of February. Mary was told she would die the next morning. On the 8th of February 1587, in the great hall of the castle, Mary Stuart went to the block. She was 44 years old and had been a prisoner for 19 years. By the contemporary account, she met it with composure. The executioner asked her forgiveness. She gave it. And then the execution was botched. The eyewitness report records that it took 2 strokes of the axe, the first failing to kill her, and then a cut through the last gristle before the head came free. You'll often hear it told as 3 blows. The first-hand account says 2 and a final cut. Either way, it was not clean. When the executioner lifted the head for the crowd, the rich auburn hair came away in his hand. It was a wig. Beneath it, Mary's own hair was short and grey. There is one more detail, and it is the one no one ever forgets. As her body was moved, a small dog was found hidden in her skirts. It would not leave her. It lay down between her head and her body, in her blood, and had to be carried away and washed. Elizabeth's response was immediate and theatrical. Fury. She claimed she had never meant the warrant to be sent at all, and turned on Davison, who was arrested, locked in the Tower, tried, and ruinously fined. The designated scapegoat for a death the whole government had wanted. So how do we read this one? Start with the hardest part, the part Mary's admirers tend to skip. She was very probably guilty of the thing she was charged with. The body of that July letter appears to be real. By the standards of her own century, she could mount a defense, a prisoner endorsing her own rescue, in an age when killing a tyrant was argued from the pulpit. But she did, in all likelihood, put her blessing to a plan that ended with Elizabeth dead. She was not simply a victim. And yet, look at what the state did with a case it believed it had already won. It built the channel she incriminated herself through. It planted the agent who opened it. And once it held her genuine words, it forged more anyway. The conviction may have been just. The process was rotten to its core. Both of those things are true at the same time, and you don't have to choose between them. That's the discomfort I want to leave you with. Because the real verdict here isn't on Mary, it's on the precedent. Elizabeth understood, better than any of her ministers, that the axe at Fotheringhay cut 2 ways. To prove that an anointed queen could be tried and lawfully killed was to prove it could be done to any of them. 2 generations later, an English king lost his head to his own parliament, Charles I. He was Mary's grandson. The principle that made his execution thinkable was rehearsed first on her. The throne tried to bury the block's idea by using it. It couldn't. Once a crowned head can be made to fall by law, no crown is ever quite safe again. That is where the throne met the block, and the throne is the one that should have been afraid.